Nile, the Zambezi, the great grey-green greasy Limpopo. Those mighty rivers of Africa are household names. Yet very few people outside Africa have ever heard of this river. In times of flood and drought, famine and plenty, the Luangwa River equals them all. It flows through a valley that may still be the last kingdom of the elephants. Years ago, the Luangwa Valley in Zambia was Africa as everyone dreams of it before man began to slaughter and confine its wildlife. In the valley, man barely existed. The Luangwa is a river whose moods, both savage and benign, govern the lives of every living thing within 30 miles of its banks, even down to the smallest elephant that struggles to cross it. The Central African state of Zambia takes its name from the Zambezi. The Luangwa flows into the Zambezi on Zambia's border with Zimbabwe and Mozambique. It flows through a wide valley, an ancient part of the African rift system. 30 miles to the west of the river is a high escarpment. We're looking from the east. The valley is so wide and flat that it doesn't look like a valley at all. During the rains between November and May, parts of the valley always flood under several feet of water. In exceptional rainy seasons, most of the valley is drowned. Our story begins in May, when the normal floods that you expect after any rainy season are just starting to go down. Where the Luangwa Valley is concerned, normal flood is a relative term. By June, the river has largely returned to its banks. Now, after apparent death by drowning, comes rebirth. The river and the rains that feed it have brought about a miraculous greening of the valley. It is as if every tree, every bush has drunk as deeply as it can, knowing that it will have to survive at least 5 months of intense, waterless heat. A few trees burst into leaf, only to fall late victims to the floods. This valley has many ways of hoarding the river's gift. This is a dambo, the local name for a marshy depression. It lies a mile or so back from the river itself. It's an apt enough name now. In 3 months' time, there won't be a drop of water left in it. Because of the sandy nature of the riverbed, the Luangwa changes and rearranges the scenery along its banks. These mounds of silt left by floods weren't there last year and certainly won't be there next. After the floods die down, there's food everywhere in the valley. Luangwa's 20,000 elephants are quick to take advantage of the plenty. And not only elephants. The valley contains one of the greatest concentrations of large animals left in Africa, mainly because large areas of it are almost completely undisturbed. This is a time when many animals respond to a glut of food by having their young. The river is back in its meandering course, but now that course alters and drastically affects the lives of the valley's animals. This loop is an oxbow lagoon in the making. Perhaps after next season's floods, it will have become cut off from the main river and formed a lake. The river forces a short cut across the narrow neck of the oxbow. Silt builds up, forming a new lagoon. When the river next rises, the oxbow is once again flooded with muddy water. After the river has returned to its new course, the mud sinks. This silts up the oxbow until it becomes a shallower, permanent, U-shaped lake. We're looking across one arm of an oxbow lagoon towards the high ground remaining in the center of the U. These oxbows become reservoirs during the early part of the dry season and attract a cross-section of the valley's wild animals. Here's an older oxbow, silted up sufficiently to give an anchorage for reeds and grasses, but still deep enough to hide a family of feeding elephants. An oxbow acts as a magnet to animals of all kinds. A wood stork drops in to fish, shading the water with its wing, the better to spot the quarry. A young lily trotter, trotting not on lilies, but on the weed called Nile cabbage. Tree ducks use the lagoon for a wash and brush up. The importance of the oxbows is that they provide drinking places when nearly everything else except the river has dried up. A pair of greater kudu bulls, attended by oxpeckers, cautiously approach to drink. Hippos enjoy oxbows as restful wallowing places. Peace and quiet vanishes when a herd of buffalo move in for a drink. During the rainy season, the buffalo have split up into small parties. Now, as the water sources become scarce, they band together in herds of 1,000 or more. Buffalo are the chief prey of Luangwa lions. Forming a herd of 1,000 or so is a good defensive measure. They know the lions will be hunting wherever grazing and water are plentiful, and that means close to the lagoons and to the river itself. By August, the level of the river has dropped dramatically, but it's still deep enough to leave a tide mark halfway up an elephant. The mother shields her charge from the force of the current and finally moves, ready to give a tow if necessary. Mother and calf have been across the river, attracted by the good feeding in the lightly populated area on the far bank. There are a few African village farms there. Now in the early morning, they're returning to their side of the river, where they enjoy complete protection. Luangwa elephants are well aware that the river is a frontier between safety and danger, but the temptation of easy pickings on the far bank is hard to resist. The bank that means safety for the young elephant by no means guarantees it to other animals. A herd of puku suddenly panics. A small party of hunting dogs is on the prowl. A young puku is hidden in the grass. One picks up the scent. Against all odds, it escapes. But not for long. August is the time when many of the trees produce their seeds and fruit, and the elephants know that the bounty of winter thorn, ebony and machenja is theirs for the shaking. In the past 15 years, 80% of the elephants have been killed by poachers in this, their last kingdom. The valley is 450 kilometers long and 45 wide. The elephants are seldom seen in large herds. Instead, they're dispersed in small family and kinship groups. Freedom of movement may be what has enabled so many of them to survive the onslaught of poaching during the 80s. Today, their numbers show encouraging signs of recovery. The groups are still large enough to wreak havoc among the trees when the fruits have run out. Mopani, winterthorn, baobab. They strip or ring bark indiscriminately. It's the same with the last few concentrations of elephants everywhere in Africa. The difference in the Luangwa Valley is that here the elephants are being left to sort out their own problems without man's interference. The battle between the elephants and the trees sways from one side to another across the valley. At times the elephants seem to be winning, leaving large patches of woodland looking like the shattered treescapes of World War I. Looking at these ruined and desolate areas, it's hard to believe that overall the woodlands in the valley are in good condition. Mercifully, there is always the river and its annual floods to produce the regrowth that provides alternative food, and elephants are Catholic in their taste. There is one tree, however, which they don't appear to relish. It's particularly plentiful. It's the kigelia, or sausage tree. Elephants may not care for it, but when it begins fruiting and flowering in August, it's very much in demand by others. Lovebirds pillage the unopened buds. Vervet monkeys are even more destructive before the flowers get a chance to open, though their big moment comes later. By September, the kigelia season is in full swing, offering a choice of blossom, buds, nectar, and young fruits. The vervets arrive in early morning when the blossoms are full of sweet, heavily scented nectar. Impala wait below for the handout. Thornycroft's giraffe, a darker subspecies unique to the valley, are particularly partial to the young seed pods. The long blue tongue snakes out and tries to lasso a young sausage. There are probably more crocodiles in this 300-mile stretch of the Luangwa River than anywhere else in Africa. In the whole valley, there are 15 per square kilometre, or 3,500 pairs of hungry jaws. Animals who come to drink in the river are instinctively aware of the danger. This herd of puku is far from relaxed. Thirst urges them to persist, until at last one of their number takes one step too close. By September, the river has dropped sufficiently to expose high sandy banks. This is the moment for which the carmine bee-eaters have been waiting. These brilliantly coloured birds return to the Luangwa each year from the east coast 750 kilometres away. The river provides them with everything they need to raise their young. Banks soft enough for them to dig nesting tunnels with their curved beaks. Plenty of food in the form of aquatic insects. Their courtship flights often take place over the water. The nesting tunnels are up to 2.5 meters long. Latecomers are still excavating when other birds are well installed. Like everything else in the valley, their program is closely tied to the seasonal state of the river. First, they wait until the water level falls, exposing tall, firm banks. Then they must rear their young to flying stage before early rains threaten the colony. White-fronted bee-eaters sometimes share the same nesting site. In late August, the eggs hidden deep in the nesting tunnels start to hatch. Dragonflies are a favorite food for the young. Bees seem hardly to figure on the Luangwa bee-eater's menu. Perhaps it's just a question of availability. Even inside their sandcastles, the bee-eaters have their enemies. A raid by a monitor lizard calls for a noisy demonstration. But now the colony is threatened by a far greater danger. Several months of sun have dried and cracked the bank. It only takes a few buffalo to trot by overhead to start a collapse. Eggs and young are also lost when the river temporarily rises after an early storm. This time the culprit is the baking sun. The main danger from the river is yet to come, and when it does, it will threaten much more than just the bee-eater colony. It's October, and the Luangwa River is at its lowest. The sun temperatures are reaching 50 degrees centigrade. For many animals, the river is their only lifeline. Now that the oxbows and the dambos are fast drying up, it's the only place they can be sure of finding good drinking water. Though these giraffe are cautious as always, the open shoreline offers them a fair guarantee against surprise by lions. In some oxbow lagoons, the water has almost evaporated. The fish are concentrated in the muddy puddles that remain. Some species can survive by burying themselves in mud, if they get the chance. Even the baboons look as though they would appreciate the chance to join the fishermen. But they've come for a drink and are merely intrigued by the catfish splashing in their drinking water. Catfish are more to the taste of the great white pelicans who flock to the drying oxbows for easy pickings. The usual tactic of driving the fish by communal beak dipping is hardly necessary. The woodstock seems to have done rather better. Some very unusual anglers join in. The kite is normally a scavenger. This bird saw the fish jam-packed close to the surface and decided to emulate the noble osprey or even the fish eagle. It transfers fish from talon to beak in mid-air. Kites often do this when scavenging. The bird flies to a tree to eat its unaccustomed prey. A moment of undignified rivalry among fish eagles. Not all the lagoons dry up completely. The more recently formed oxbows, in which the old course of the river has not yet had time to silt up and grow shallow, retain quite a depth of water even into October, the hottest time of Luangwa's year. This is often where the big mixed fishing parties, including crocodiles, gather. Wood storks often content themselves with frogs. Pied kingfishers too can adapt their diet to what's on offer. The African skimmer makes the most of the deep water left in the lagoon by scissoring the surface for tiny organisms with its lower bill. The motto for everyone is, get it while the getting is good. It may be gone by tomorrow. The water has long since vanished from the Luangwa's tributaries. Yet this is where the elephants, who need clear, fresh water, come to look for it. They know that there is still water 2 or 3 feet below the dried-out bed of these sand rivers. They come in small family parties to dig, and in digging, they help other animals. The bushbuck, for instance. They seem able to filter out the sand. Even the calves have that skill. At this season, the shortage of fresh water concentrates the elephants close to the main river, the oxbows, and the tributaries. So in early morning and late evening, family parties come and go all the time. Elephant mothers are devoted to their young, but are always prepared to put them in their place. After all, its elders and betters dug the hole. There is water even beneath this unpromising-looking site. Warthogs know all about the possibilities of renovating an old elephant digging. Unlike the bushbuck, they're very fine excavators on their own account. They've got the snouts and the tusks for the job. But first they clear the site of any local opposition, even a group of ground hornbills. The bigger of the 2 males takes possession of a promising elephant hole. Enter now a warthog family, complete with a litter of piglets. They obviously know about the drinking place. They've probably used it before. Backed by parental might, the piglets need only wait. But the occupant plainly isn't a reasonable sort of warthog. The obvious solution is to find another water hole. There is one drinking place which stays open right through the dry season. The water there wells out of the ground. In places, it actually steams. This is thermal water, heavily loaded with mineral salts. The animals need these salts, but can only tolerate the water in limited quantities. Whatever the internal effects of the thermal water, it's always good for external treatment. However, it's no cure for thirst. By late October, the hottest time of all, thirst is a universal problem. Quarreling zebra stallions symbolize the tension building up in the valley. The tension, perhaps only detectable to a human observer, is a compound of heat, tinder dryness, and the difficulty of finding enough to eat and drink. 15 years ago, Luangwa was the last stronghold of the black rhino. 4,000 of them lived in the valley. Today, a scene like this is unimaginable. There may now be only 40 black rhino left in the whole of Zambia. Poachers have killed the rest. Once, their only enemy was drought. Dry October is a bad time to be born. A baboon carries her dead baby as if hoping to nurse it back to life. It's even a bad time to be young. The elephant calf came for a drink and became trapped in the mud of the dried-up oxbow. The same happened to this baby rhino. The kindest thing is that a predator will put them out of their misery. It is the time of bushfires in the valley. They usually start spontaneously and play an important part in regeneration. They help the new grass to come through after the rains. Big animals are not troubled by the fires. They can move faster than the flames. But large areas of burn do have the effect of cutting down such food as there is left at this season. So there are local movements. These roan antelope are part of a general restiveness. The leaper amongst the crowned cranes and puku is a Cookson's wildebeest, a subspecies unique to the Luangwa Valley. And as if the heat and smoke, the drought and lack of grazing aren't enough for the plains animals to put up with at this low point of the year, there are always the ever-present and plentiful Luangwa lions. The malaise of the season appears even to have affected this pride. The lioness up the tree is possibly a stranger. She's certainly unwelcome. When she sneaks down, this is pointed out very forcibly. She makes a dignified exit. Even a good way away, she still isn't tolerated. The residents move back to their tree. At last, she accepts the situation. She's obviously in very poor condition. Perhaps this is why her sisters rejected her. By late October, many animals concentrate along the Luangwa River, especially these. With the oxbows and dambos closed to them by drought, there's only one place for a hippo to go: the river. Whenever the sandbanks and currents favor them, they crowd into the resting and wallowing places, young and old alike. Other river dwellers take advantage of the situation, though it's likely to be a temporary one. Very little should be assumed from the apparently benign expression of this bather about the placid nature of this annual hippo gathering. The keynote is one of aggression. The aggression is caused by overcrowding. Bulls, especially, are pushed into jaw-to-jaw confrontation. It's rare to see two of the largest of the world's land animals even remotely troubled by each other's presence. The fact that the elephant herd is unhappy about the hippo in its path is possibly a direct result of the dry season overcrowding. Perhaps the elephants are touchy because they have a number of young with them. A second hippo gets his orders to move on. Though the hippos are very unlikely to harm the elephant calves, their tusks can do enormous damage. They cause a great many human fatalities. These fight scars show what a hippo can do. A hippo's tusks, like an elephant's, are overgrown teeth. This hippo's are deformed. One has even grown through the upper jaw, but it seems none the worse for it. Oxpeckers clean up the scars. Amidst all this male aggression, there are a few moments of maternal bliss. Here's another freak among the gathering, a pink hippo. A strange pigmentation doesn't seem to be a disadvantage. This one has come to the end of the road. He's old and is fought it out with too many younger bulls. Now he's been attacked by a lion and he's come ashore to die. His carcass will be disposed of not by the usual undertakers, the vultures, but by the super scavengers of the Luangwa River, the crocodiles. Hippos and crocs between them present a scene of primeval violence. The tension of the dry season has to break. In late November, the first cracks appear. The clouds pile up and heavy showers fall. The first storm clouds are more a promise than a fulfillment. The fulfillment isn't long in coming. Throughout December, the storms become more frequent. The banks of the Luangwa are deserted now. Elephant and buffalo move away as new grass and leaves appear inland. The crocodiles and hippos are left in possession. There's a general movement of animals away from the river. In a normal year, the valley gets 82 centimeters of rain, mostly between December and April. The year of our story was an utterly abnormal one. It seemed as though the sky had sucked up a large part of the Indian Ocean, especially to drop it on Luangwa. Such exceptional rainfall occurs only about every 8 years. All the major tributaries of the Luangwa River rise on the 1,000-meter-high Muchinga escarpment to the west. Almost overnight, the trickles became cataracts. The sandy riverbeds, where the elephants dug for water a few weeks before, are suddenly 2 meters under. In a normal year, no one moves on the floodplains close to the river once the Luangwa rises. This particular year, it wasn't to be merely the floodplains that went under, but the whole valley. The casualties were everywhere. Single elephants can probably make it to safety, but this female had a young calf with her. She eventually climbed up the bank further downstream and managed to help her calf out of the water. The Nile, the Zambezi, the great grey-green greasy Limpopo. Those great rivers of Africa are household names. Yet very few people outside Africa know the story of the Luangwa River in Zambia, and the Luangwa equals them all. In spite of the depredations of poachers, the heart of Africa beats on in the Luangwa Valley.